Books, check them out. Books, check them out. You can read about stars or electric guitars. Books, check them out. One of the things that's odd about me probably is that I spent 25 years in thousands of books. And there's pros and cons to that. I'm going to talk about some of those pros and cons today because I think this is one of the key elements that I notice in the world for why things are different than they used to be. Probably most people were not big readers, but there's recent studies and papers and things being written about how hardly anyone reads books. Maybe half of the country, I think 50%, supposedly read a book in a year. And that's, I mean, when you compare that to the other stats that claim that 20% of the public can't read, and most of the public reads at a 6th grade level. I don't even know what a 6th grade level is. That's like Harry Potter, but I don't think even the average public is reading a 400-page Harry Potter story. I don't know what 6th grade reading level is, but the dumbing down and all of that is everywhere is very apparent. And the more I think about it, the more I think that this has to be one of the key problems. It's not just an issue of IQ and intelligence and reading comprehension or anything like that, because you could be an evil genius and read all the books. But let's be honest, that's not really the problem. We don't have a mass number of evil scientists running wild in all the cities. There are some evil mad scientists, but that's not a large-scale problem. When I was in high school, I noticed that most people didn't read a lot, but many people did. And a lot of the reading that, for example, girls would do would be pretty useless Oprah-style reading list fiction. Guys, in general, if they read, it was very nerdy stuff. Like, that's right when manga was starting to get popular. I wouldn't even call that reading necessarily. And then fantasy novels. And I have to confess that even though in high school I was a ladies' man, I did keep my fantasy reading kind of on the down low, because fantasy is not amenable to the ladies. In fact, it's almost a kind of natural birth control if you like sci-fi and fantasy, to ensure that if it gets out, you're not gonna have a date. But after high school, when I got into my college era, which took me for, unfortunately, very, very long, because I was working the entire time. I worked full time as I did college and then grad school. I noticed even then, most people in the classes that I had, even in grad school, really it wasn't about mastering these subjects and knowing them inside and out. It was more so about, or knowing the truth, I should say. It was more so, let's just do the minimum, get the work done, get in and get out. So even education is not really what education is supposed to be about. And I would imagine, I don't know, but I would imagine that nowadays it's way worse with reading, with subject matter, and whether books and reading are even important. But you cannot underestimate the importance of this great gift. And I do think that a lot of the success that we've had, on our side of things, comes largely from the patrimony that my mom, I guess that would be my matrimony of my mom, giving me a love for books, and herself being an editor and a librarian, creating a child who was a bibliophile, I think that was one of the best gifts I could have gotten, because I could have just not cared about that at all. I could have only focused on, I don't know, what did dudes focus on? Chasing women in sports, I guess. But I realized that it was going to be a bit of a sacrifice to no longer care about sports back in my teen era, and so to start to get into bookish subjects. But I had enough gumption, I guess. I didn't care. So I didn't care about sports. I didn't care about being the, star point guard on the basketball team or whatever. I quit caring about all that and chose a more nerdy route. And by the time I was 19, I started branching out and getting into religious, theological topics and philosophy. And even then, also deep into history. I didn't care that much about any of that when I was in high school. I only cared about partying and girls. And then when I had all of this other domain opened up, that was a huge change in my life. And I almost became a kind of a quasi-monastic in an intellectual way. I mean, not like an incel. I had girlfriends, I had dates, but nothing was as important to me at that time period during my 20s, mainly, as my reading. And there were, again, are pros and cons to this approach. And that never really quit. I mean, I've always had the same, voracious reading habits since about 1998. And even earlier with a lot of the fantasy stuff that I read back in the day, like Lord of the Rings many times through, and C.S. Lewis, all that kind of stuff. I even liked all the weird, like, creeper type fantasy authors, like, I don't even know the names of them now, but like the ones like the Tad Williams. I'm not saying he's a creeper, but I was into that kind of stuff too back in the day. But although I think that stuff has less value, even that has some value. It's sad that people are being robbed of this element of education. And I would also say that there's this weird tendency in Western education to make people hyper-focused on one area. And these people believe that they're very educated, but they're not. They don't know anything beyond a hyper-specific subject matter and focus. So if you start talking about literature, they don't care, or they couldn't even discuss it. This is something else I've noticed that's a problem, which is that people think that you could be educated or a well-rounded person without having some degree of education in literature. I don't understand this. It's very bizarre to me. In fact, there was a study that someone did some years ago, my friend sent me, talking about how a Dostoevsky text will light up more areas of the brain than even something that you might think would beat it, like, I don't know, a logic textbook or something like that. And the reason for that is that within this kind of a complex, technically worded novel or story, you have a lot of different subtext, layers, and motivations, and the various stories going on within one story are such that it takes tremendous focus to be able to finish this kind of a feat. It was similar when I read through Tragedy and Hope. It was a very difficult, boring text, very technical, and it took a lot of focus, even in a geopolitical history text, to get through all that. And you find something similar with something very complex, like, Crime and Punishment or something like that. And I remember doing Crime and Punishment very quickly. I enjoyed it. I got a lot out of it, but I basically just sat and read it, I think, for about 2 days straight. And imbibed most of it. I got most of the, symbolic and sort of redemptive subtext, but I don't think most people will be able to do this, given the fact that attention spans are being destroyed. And also, even people that do read, they're all being given just absolute garbage to read. The bookstores nowadays, which are fast dying out, are really only filled with absolute trash. And so even the reading public are uneducated. The normie reading public that thinks they're educated, I mean, that's just a whole other thing. So anyway, what I've learned from 25 years of reading is that I could have done other things, and there might have been some profit in those other things, but I would never take back 25 years in thousands of books, because I think that it was a kind of a sacrifice that made the present situation possible. And it wouldn't be possible had I not done what I did. I could have gone back and focused on upgrading or thinking about tech, in a more serious way, and maybe building the channel quicker or sooner, or writing a book quicker or sooner, or something like that. But I also wouldn't have been at the point where I was. So, point of all this is to give you some drops of wisdom, some wisdom drip. Your time is precious, and everyone's time is being sapped by the internet, and you're being robbed of great works of art and literature that would help you develop as a person. I mean, texts like Dostoevsky that you can't translate into a YouTube video. You can't make that into a reel or a short. All that's being taken from you. And the promise is ease, simplicity, and immediacy, which supposedly tech offers. But in reality, the formation of the well-rounded person that you could have through exposure to the classics is going to be taken away. In fact, Bertrand Russell said the technocracy will not allow you to read the Bible or Shakespeare or any of the classics, because the classics, he says, might induce in a person a spirit of adventure. And the New World Order can't have adventure. So don't let the internet and tech gadgets take away from you your future and your education. If you like this video, hit like and share, and I would recommend thinking about ways to start reading. Also, you can make use of the promo code in the show description to get started with Bitcoin. That's Fun Bitcoin. And also get started on your health through the links to choq.com, choq.com, the best in supplementation on the internet. Use the promo code JAY40 to get 40% off. Hit like, hit share, and tell me what you think below. This is just a chill, rumination. Not anything too serious today, but hopefully you get some wisdom from this.